Floyd Shivambu has done another interview with SMWX, and this is the podcast that is hosted by Dr. Sizwe Mpofu-Walsh. Going to watch this interview, I had some questions, thoughts, expectations. Number one, I was asking myself, is he going to give a theoretical framework for his departure? The reason I was asking myself this is because Floyd has always framed himself as an intellectual, somebody who is guided by Marxist, Leninist type of thinking. So I wanted to see if he would finally give some kind of an answer which would give a theoretical framework for his departure from the EFF, simply because he frames himself as an intellectual. Number two, I was asking myself a bigger question around the politics of the left, progressive politics. I wanted to see if he was going to give a vision for progressive politics in South Africa in the age of the DA and ANC coalition, and if he was going to give, even at a higher level, some type of a cohesive strategy or roadmap for the left becoming the next government of South Africa in 2029. Because the dynamics of the current political moment are such that you do have a DA-ANC coalition, which is a neoliberal coalition which seeks to advance neoliberal ideologies and ways of government, privatization of public goods and infrastructure, reduction of the public service, freezing salaries for people who work in the civil service, and to just approach things from a perspective which doesn't create a lot of structural change. South Africa does need a lot of structural change. Unfortunately, this particular DA-ANC coalition is not designed for that. It is a market-friendly coalition, a market and media-endorsed governing framework. And as things stand right now, when you look at the left bloc, the EFF and MK are sitting on 24.1%, while the DA, Freedom Front plus IFP are sitting on 26% based on the results of the last election. So there's a question around how does this left coalition or left political side of the spectrum have a path to government, or are they always going to be a voice which is critical of a neoliberal, market-centered center government in the next administration and the next administration? So these are the questions that I had going in to watch the interview. I recommend that you watch the interview. I'm not going to give spoilers here per se, but I'm going to reflect on some of the things that happened in the interview, which I think are relevant. And you can go come back to this one if you haven't watched it after you watch, and then we can have a conversation. So I'm not going to show clips from the interview or anything like that, but I'm going to give my thoughts on the interview as things stand right now, right? Also, spoilers, they're bad for movies and stuff, but I don't think they matter so much for a discussion around, an interview by a politician. But let's get into my thoughts around this interview. Firstly, I don't think that Floyd Shivambu articulates something that is necessary for him to articulate. He does not articulate what about the EFF policies and postures that he no longer found to be consistent with his political framework, which he identifies in the interview and other places as Pan-Africanism, Black consciousness, anti-colonialism, anti-racism, and anti-neocolonialism. Right? So that's how he identifies himself. He said that he conceptualized all of the names in the EFF, the cardinal pillars, the policy documents of the EFF, which then begs the question, if all of this is your intellectual property, and I think you may be exaggerating, because he's very happy to say that the documents that are coming up right now in the MK are collaborative, and his role is to bring all the voices together to come up with a cohesive document with a golden thread. But he says, when it's now EFF stuff, now I wrote everything, I wrote everything. But aside from this thing where I think you're exaggerating, if all of this is your IP, right, your intellectual property, and you effectively were guiding the direction of this intellectual property, why would you walk away, right? Because there's no issues in that sense. Because fundamentally, he's saying, I was the driver of the think tank within the EFF. then it's therefore logical to conclude that if you were the driver of the think tank in the EFF, you didn't actually leave because of philosophical differences or divergence in political views. It must be something else, right? Then the question, what is that something else, right? So that's the first thought that I had watching this. The second thought I had watching this is he gives this reflection on Jacob Zuma, right? He says Jacob Zuma gave multiple analysis of the harms of division of the progressive movement, and he gave multiple analysis around the power of neoliberal forces globally and how historically they have operated. He points out, right, that he regrets how them, as the EFF, were used by certain factions in the ANC to push out Jacob Zuma. He does a comparative with the pushing out, if you will, of Lula da Silva in Brazil, who was president, if you recall, from 2003 till 2011, was kind of like pushed out, recently came back into power in 2023. But in July of 2017, Lula was convicted of charges of money laundering, corruption in a trial, and spent actually 580 days in prison, close to 2 years. So he says, look, when I look at this thing, I see similarities between how we treated Zuma, how we then became part of an agenda to remove this guy, right? And he says that he regrets a lot of that. So in light of his remarks on the analyses that are provided by Zuma on divide and conquer, how he views particular moments, then there seems to be a contradiction to me that he would then take a decision that would contribute to the weakening of the organized left. And Dr. Mpofu Walsh asked him a question around this as well. And let me expand what I'm talking about here. The media is currently embracing and relishing and running on the narrative that the EFF is a sinking ship. We've seen cartoons from Zapiro. We've seen a variety of discourse around the EFF is failing, etc., etc. That's what they are saying, right? And we've seen some polling that has issues, but the polling has said that EFF will then be dropping to 6%. If there was an election now, they're sitting at 6%. So Floyd says, Zuma spoke to us multiple times that divide and rule is how the ANC was captured, is how, leftist movements are being undermined, etc., etc. But his action in and of itself is contributing to this. So he then tries to sidestep the heart of the question. Please go watch the interview. Make sure that you can see whether or not I'm being fair or not. In law, we have a concept which is known as sine qua non, right? Which is but for a particular action, but for this, a result would not occur. But for your particular action, a result will then not occur. So in a sine qua non analysis, we're looking for a sequence of events which examines your conduct. Because if your action cannot be removed from the consequences that then ensue, then you also play a role in that particular consequences, right? So sine qua non is basically without something, something else would not be possible. So without his withdrawal from the EFF, right, some of these narratives that currently exist would not currently be gaining the traction that they are. The consequence of his departure would have been foreseeable to him in the context of how will the media respond, how will the market respond, how will the DA and other people who say they are opposed to left-wing politics respond, right? The DA had already said that its enemy number one was EFF. So in making this decision, he is contributing in one way to this same continuation of that perception, right? And to the weakening of the collective left. Let's do a thought experiment. Assuming that the EFF does drop to 6% in 2029, and that the MK, for instance, goes up to 18%, for the sake of argument, right? If those are the numbers, that still places the MK and EFF block on 24% and gives the DA, IFP, Freedom Front Plus room to use its percentages to make a deal with whoever is the winning ANC in a similar manner to the 2024 deal. Because Panyaza Lesufi wears the t-shirts, don't kill honey again, etc., etc. But the way that he governs Gauteng is still market friendly. He's still somebody who's like, let's go cashless, let's do this, let's do this. He's not a socialist in his, so even if he wins, you don't necessarily get a left agenda from the ANC. If Fikile Mbalula were to win, for instance, you don't necessarily get a left agenda from him, because he's very much a defender of the neoliberal market approach, right? So if we were to play a scenario analysis where either you get Paul Mashatile and Panyaza, they're not necessarily inclined to go left in terms of economic policy, or you get Ronald Damula and Fikile Mbalula, some formulation of that combination, that ANC is also not inclined to go hard left, right? What that means is that they are likely to make a new deal with the DA. Let's say Solima Latsi then becomes the leader of the Democratic Alliance, or Sifiwe Khwarube becomes the leader. They can make a deal with her. John is out of that equation, perhaps. So what I'm trying to put across here is that if you say Zuma's spoken to us about how, the neoliberal forces globally are powerful, how divide and conquer was used, then my question is, how is your decision not contributing to the same divide and rule strategy that you identified as the barrier to the progress of the progressive political agenda globally? Put differently, if you say, for instance, alcohol is your problem, right, in your behavior, and it's making you have problems as captain of the rugby team, let's say, and then it's making you, see the thighs out there on the street as attractive, right? Then you say, look, as the rugby captain of this very, very successful team, what I'm going to do to stop my problem is I'm going to stop drinking whiskey, but I'm going to move to vodka. Vodka is going to be the thing that solves this thing. Then we would have to ask you and say, hey, we're not rugby captain, but how does that make any sense? Do you get what I'm trying to put across? No disrespect to any rugby captains out there, right? So if you move from whiskey to vodka, it will not prevent you from being diverted by nice thighs out there on the streets. Do you see what I'm trying to say? Do you comprehend? Anyway, I can only conclude then that this contradiction is also evident to him, that he knew that this outcome was inevitable, but that he still chose to leave, and that his concern about the unity of the progressive movement is overstated, meaning that there's another reason. If there's a if someone is explaining something to you, if they say to somebody, maybe they say, Will Smith, I love you very much. You are the best man on earth, wada, wada, wada. And then they say, but I had an entanglement with August. Will Smith can be like, yeah, this is adding up, man. It's not adding up. Then it means there's another reason, or this particular stated reason is not the real reason. So there are some comments that he made. Floyd likes to insist that I don't do personal politics. Nothing is personal here, never personal, always professional, always ideological. But there are some statements that he made which were shady and very personal. So some of the statements that he made, for instance, he said, if you have these small political parties, then you have fiefdoms, which become self-enrichment programs. Self-enrichment programs. Fiefdoms, which one are you coming from? Are you coming from a self-enrichment program? Then he says that, there are many leaders in the EFF who are not playing a meaningful role and are scared to be expressive and say what should be the direction of the organization. Who are they scared of to be expressive and say what should be the direction of the organization? You're being personal, my guy. It's obvious because there's only one other guy who is above you. Huh? Then he says that, no, I'm not loyal to these people. I don't have brothers here. Brotherhood in politics can border on gangsterism. Gangsterism. A whole gangsterism. A full gangsterism. Yeah. So what are you trying to say, my guy? These comments, I actually think, indicate to me more why he would have left the EFF. These types of comments are showing me a lot. Right? And then he also said that, no, many people knew I was leaving, blah, blah, blah. But I just said, no, come down, guys. Don't come with me. You'll come at your own time if you want, etc., etc. So I think there are some questions just around even that. But at a personal level, aside from politics now and stuff like that, if we are fighting a big fight, we're saying we're fighting racism, neocolonialism, colonialism, the massive forces globally, which are trying to keep black people at the foot, under the shoe of the economy globally. I would want to know that my brother that I'm fighting with, or not the person that I'm fighting with here, is loyal to me for the whole fight. When people are in the army or wherever they are, in the army, you have to have so much trust in the soldier fighting to the left, fighting to the right. They have to feel like your brother. Obviously, they're not your brother. They just came from wherever they came from. You didn't grow up with these people. But because you're fighting in the same war, there has to be a certain amount of loyalty that comes with that. So for me, I couldn't embrace fully his articulation of the problem, and then also this, but we're not friends type of thing. Shucks, bruv. People who have built the biggest companies in the world, about Steve Jobs, these Sergey Brins and Larry Pages, at some point they did have perceptions of themselves as being family, working together as missionaries on this grand goal. There's a certain type of loyalty which comes from being on a mega mission of generational importance. But what he's articulating for me is like, no, me, I'm a mercenary for the ideas. I can shift, I can move, professionalism. This thing is not accounting, fam. This is my view. It's not accounting, right? I think an accountant can go from KPMG to Ernst & Young and nobody will care. But I do think that if you say that the enemies that you're fighting are so significant, there are going to be people within MK who are going to be looking at you saying, but this guy, he has got like a 10-year window. He'll be a communist and then he'll move. And then he'll go to ANC and then he'll move. And then he'll move and then he'll move. Is he truly about this politics? Certain fights. I'm talking at a human level. If we say we're fighting the devil, let's say we're Christians, and we're praying together for 10 years, fighting the devil, I'll be very worried if you just shifted church and then said, I don't care about this guy like that. We were just praying together on the mountain for 10 years. Don't worry about it. I don't know, man. Floyd, at a human level, man, I don't know. I think you should re-examine that. If you're coming to funerals and weddings and other spaces and places with me, but then you can comfortably say, you're not my friend. Anyway, that also applies to Julius. I think the criticism applies on both ends because they're both acting like, it was just politics. I don't know, guys. I don't know. Because why would I, as an individual, sacrifice anything for you guys if you can just say to me at a later stage, it's just politics. All of this is politics. That's politics. Why would I put my life on the line for you guys? Because the people who are supporting MK, EFF, the far left in South Africa, or not even far left, let's just call it hard left, if you will, because the ANC is center left, so they don't always commit to, leftist things. But let's say you are saying hard left, I'm in the hard left, right? I'm progressive, wire, I'm real progressive. Those people have to make a lot of sacrifices at their workplaces to be saying Mkwazam Konto or fighter this, fighter that. And if they cannot see a certain type of camaraderie and loyalty at the top, then the question then becomes, they're doing that at the ground. They are viewing themselves as brothers in a lifelong mission. But you guys at the top are just like transactional. Then are they making sacrifices that are worthwhile? Because these are their lives. These are people's lives that you guys are just saying, it's just transactional politics, strategic and all of this. I don't know. At a personal level, I think we need to bring back leaders in Africa who are willing to die for stuff, who are willing to go to prison for stuff, who are, basically what I'm trying to say, have conviction. Conviction. I think conviction is important. I think transactional politics cannot be the thing. Conviction is important. Conviction will bring more people than transactionalism, in my view. Anyway, let's move on. That's just a personal side comment, just my philosophical approach to life, right? So he says, and I think he's going to have a problem here in future. He says that the election results were the will of the people and we must respect the will of the people. Now, this makes me wonder if he will be able to navigate some of the waters of the MK as it stands right now. Because as you know, the MK is still rejecting the election results and challenging the outcome. Floyd says that's fine, they can still do that and it's important to do that. But you just said the election is the will of the people. It can't be both. It's a contradiction. If you say the election is the will of the people and must be respected, how can you simultaneously then say that you support the MK? Because MK has refused to accept the outcome of the 29 May election. And Jacob Zuma has claimed that the party, didn't get 14.6 and actually received significantly more, up to 2/3 majority. They filed that application claiming that 9.3 million votes were not accounted for. Obviously, they've lost a part of that case because the Electoral Court, while it granted the right to withdraw the case, ordered them to pay the IEC's costs on a punitive scale, right? So that's where things stand right now. So how is he going to navigate that? Also, how is Floyd going to navigate this other challenge, right, which exists in the party? MK has a traditionalist component which seeks to give more respect to traditional leaders and a bigger role to traditional leaders. MK has expressed some desire for some version of African customary law as opposed to Roman Dutch law, which is the current legal framework, right? MK has expressed some versions of nationalism. These ideas are not consistent with Floyd Shivambu's expressed politics of progressivism. Progressives do not want more power or role or responsibility to kings and chiefs. They do not particularly value monarchy and other forms of historical leadership because these particular forms of leaderships were the roots of patriarchy, were the roots of misogyny, and were the roots of other forms of class oppression, such as feudalism. Right? The nationalism of the MK is not in line with leftist ideas around Pan-Africanism. The Pan-Africanist movement recognizes the Berlin Conference of 1984-1985 as one of the darkest moments in history because it triggered the organized scramble for Africa, a scramble that created nation states based on European colonial interests. The Pan-African movement seeks African consolidation and integration, which is contrary to any articulation of nationalism. So these contradictions, to me, indicate that some of the arguments Floyd is running are not genuine to the decision that he made, because he's aware of these contradictions. Me pointing them out is not necessarily something that he doesn't know. This guy is a very smart guy, 2 master's degrees, right? One from LSE, one from WITS, etc., etc. He's not somebody who's not able to do this kind of analysis. So from these contradictions and remarks, my takeaway is the following. Number one, I think Floyd got tired of being with Julius Malema. Hence the comments about gangsterism, enrichment, all of that. Although some of that I think is hypocritical because, you're accused of having gone to meetings to ask for money, etc., with Julius, etc. And by all accounts, you also live a lavish life. So some of the stuff around enrichment, I think it's just political talk, right? Because you face the mirror, when you guys both go there, it shows the same fancy clothes, right? So Floyd, I think, thinks that the MK has a higher ceiling than the EFF. I think he thinks the EFF has reached its ceiling and the MK can go further, growing amongst Zulu population, for instance, in Mpumalanga, other spaces where he thinks maybe the EFF cannot grow. So he sees himself having a bigger role in a bigger party, and perhaps this is what has informed. I don't think it's ideology, and I don't think it's issues of the leader per se, right? So I think also, in a way, even though I just said I don't think it's the leader per se, I think that Floyd actually thinks that Jay-Z is a better leader than Julius Malema, in that he can take this thing further. So for a while, Julius was the best leader who was available for them. Because remember, they were pushed out of the ANC. They didn't necessarily want to leave. They were saying that they're going to be ANC till they die. So you're out that side. So you can't continue whether or not you were hoping to come back in. Cyril Ramaphosa makes sure that you guys don't come back because they appealed the disciplinary committee decision to Cyril. Cyril was like, these boys are not in my plans. I'm removing them. I'm going with Lamula, and then there are no other path. But I think given the choice, if you had said to Floyd, Zuma is launching a party or whatever, in 2016 or what is it? In 2019, he may even have joined at that particular point, right? So I think that he is describing some version of that. I trust Zuma more than I trust Malema in terms of leadership capacity. So he's saying it's better for me to follow this guy than that guy. I think that's part of what he's saying, right? So I think also Floyd recognized that he had no more prospects in the EFF. EFF elective conference is coming. You leave, after you lose the conference, you've got no cachet, right? People don't like a loser. Once you've lost conference, it's downhill. Look at the people who left after conference, right? Mandisa Mashego left after conference, and she was not able really to find a footprint post the EFF conference, right? Mkutama also left after conference, contesting, losing. He was not able to find footprint, right? He's in MK, but when he did Black First, Land First, because now he was perceived as a loser, right? He was not able to get a certain type of traction. So looking at the EFF, it's contested in there. You've got Ndlozi, you've got Abosina Otambo, Vuyani Pambo. You've got a lot of people there. Right, not only them, there's so many names in the EFF. Often the first people that I mention are the ones who went to FITS because I met them and then they come first to mind. But there are so many leaders within the EFF who are challenging, contesting, Naledi Chiro, whatever. There's so many. So I think he realized that I've done all that I can here, and there are so many young lions, young fighters, looking at me saying, no, man, this guy must go. I can do better than this guy. I'm the one who won student elections. I'm the one who did this. I'm the one who did that. I can draft better than this guy. Sometimes it's like that, right? There's contestation internally. And sometimes Floyd can be abrasive and aloof and arrogant and dismissive, and maybe he's not as popular with the grassroots of the EFF as maybe he was at another stage. So he did an analysis and he said, here, it's tough for me now. I've got to go. It's better to go before conference. There's only one place I can land, which will make sense. Boom, MK. This is the reality. This is what I think. That's my personal opinion, based on listening to him twice now and listening to the other discussions he's had, right? So that's number 4. Number 5, I think that he is also doing this as a self-defense mechanism. Floyd has a big challenge down the road, and that's the VBS matter and what the Matodzi affidavit said about him. The money went to him and his brother, right? And he probably feels better protected in the Zuma camp because Zuma has been dealing with these guys, ANC guys, for a long time, and he's been able to avoid, certain charges, certain stuff. So, look, if the law is looking for me, I may also go to Zuma. I'm just keeping it real. I may also feel like, Baba can mobilize, he can get the streets agitated for me in a way that maybe even the EFF cannot. Jacob Zuma still carries a lot of connections, networks in real government, and maybe he felt better protected there. These are just my reflections and real talk. So now I'm going to make some remarks that are just directed more at MK, and this MK versus EFF saga that continues playing out. Mkhwebane is now also, in MK, and she just left EFF and said that she was never going to leave, etc., and going to focus on family. Then boom, she's there with the family of MK. I want to make a comment about MK versus EFF and where I actually think MK should be directing its focus. The role of official opposition is a powerful role. You have the most time in moments of key parliamentary attention, right? Debates, oral questions, and that time can be utilized to grow the party in ways that I think are more beneficial than trying to poach from the EFF, for instance. right? With 14.5% of the votes, you have a significant number of MPs sitting on various committees where they can drive the agenda and be effective in oversight and accountability, because committees are the engine of parliamentary politics. Being in parliament in and of itself with so many seats, you can use motions effectively. You can use member bills effectively. I mean, look at how the EFF used 6% to grow to 10%. It's gone down a little bit, but yes, they used that presence to grow. Think about how the DA started. They had very few seats. They used parliament to grow. So the point I'm trying to make is that MK is not going to grow the left or left politics in South Africa by simply fighting with the EFF. They need to do more. And the numbers seem to indicate to me that they need to do more. Let me give you the numbers. According to the census data, there are 11 million South Africans aged between the ages of 20 to 29. According to the same status data, there are 10,815,426 South Africans aged between the ages of 30 to 39. So taken together, there are about 21 million South Africans between the ages of 20 to 39. It's a lot of people. But according to the IEC, there are 4,281,954 registered voters between the ages of 20 to 29, which represents 38% in the 20 to 29. According to the IEC, there are 6,771,823 registered voters between the ages of 30 to 39, representing 62%, right? So 3 out of 5 people between the ages of 30 to 39 are registered to vote, and only 2 out of 5 between the ages of 20 to 29 are registered to vote. Remember, the median age of the country is 28, right? So you want to make sure that people in this age group are more registered, but they are currently not registered. Then you look at the issue of voter turnout. Voter turnout has gone down from 66% to 58.6% from 2019 to 2024. That's not great if voter turnout keeps going down. That means effectively there are more people losing interest in politics in key demographics, that 20 to 29, 30 to 39. And they're losing interest in politics and democracy as a model that they believe works for governance, right? Then you take that with the fact that the total number of registered voters, which is 26,672,264, it's still a fraction of the total voting age population in South Africa, which is about 42 million people, meaning that only 65% of the voting age population is registered, and then effectively only 38.5% of the voting age population voted in the last election. The point being, a lot of people are not participating in politics as things stand right now. And in fact, that number is 61.5% of the population that is voting age is not participating, right? So if you want to grow, you can't just look at your next door shop. You have to look at the market holistically and say there's something happening with the market as well. And how do we attract more people from the market? The point that I'm making is that to grow the left cannot only be about getting vote share from existing parties. It has to be about growing the number of people interested and participating in politics. Being creative in parliament can lead to that, in my belief. I'm not sure that fighting between EFF and MK will grow the left in South Africa. I don't think so. I think it benefits the very same forces that they were saying that they have issues with. You know, market forces, neoliberal forces, geopolitical forces worldwide. MK needs to find creative ways to deal with voter apathy, to deal with under-registration in the 29 to 40 age group if they want to grow and if they want to have a path to leading South Africa. They're not going to do that necessarily through this strategy. Okay, that's just what I wanted to say about that. Going back to my original questions, which I started off with about what I was expecting from this interview, I don't think that I found the answers I was looking for in this interview. I don't think so. I want to make one final comment, very important comment. And this is a recognition that podcasts are becoming the driver of genuine political discourse around the world. Right now, Donald Trump today was on Joe Rogan, And a few weeks ago, he was on Flagrant. Kamala Harris has been on The Breakfast Club and apparently is doing an interview with Club Shay Shay, right? And some of these podcasts have like the strangest names, like Club Shay Shay. I love Shannon Sharp. I love Club Shay Shay. I love the moment that Club Shay Shay has been having this year, from Cat Williams up until this point. Basically, in 1 year, this podcast is now actually having the same level of gravitas significance as Joe Rogan, who has been in it for a longer time. So podcasts begin to matter more and more now, which I value. I think that's important to recognize. And I think SMWX, from a South African perspective, is going to become a very big platform for discussions on politics, especially some of these interview type of discussions. Some podcasts that currently exist and are doing well, they do beer and relatability discourse, right? You come there, you tell them, no, when I was at Konka, I saw Zizi Goto, I saw this guy with Slay Queens, etc., etc. So, there's a space for that, right? McG, for example, has a very powerful platform. I enjoy watching the interviews. He will continue to do interviews with politicians. But McG also will sometimes go left, right? And you'll say, hey, Wenda, how many people have you chowed? Are you a chowist? Are you chowing? McG will ask that. McG will set you up, right? And we've seen him do this, right? McG and Saul can go another direction, right? And also sometimes, I think Saul Penduka is very good with the political questions. He pushes back, etc., etc. But sometimes the podcast can go another direction. They're not committed to heavy political analysis, exposition, any of that, right? I don't think they spend as much time researching those elements as other platforms could have an opportunity to. Although I think there's an important role that they play, in as much as, I view Breakfast Club and Podcast and Chill to be the same type of genre. It's very important, relatable, enjoyable, and it's going to continue. But I think SMWX is giving a platform where the discourse can have more gravitas and focus more on the big ideas of the politicians and do more of the political analysis, the socio-economic analysis as well. And I think that's also important. But I still think there's something missing. I think there's a hard talk style missing element, right? Where there's a hard debate, where the politician is not just giving their version, but is also facing counter arguments and is being challenged more aggressively on the premises and conclusions of their presentations, maybe even the facts that they're relying upon to make their arguments and case studies, etc. I think South Africa will get there. But I do see the value of podcasts, even now, platforms such as SMWX, right? And I see the value of the internet, including YouTube, as an alternate to the manufactured consent of South African mainstream news media, which seeks to gatekeep the voices who get to speak, the narratives that they get to tell people. I think that we are in a space now where there is potential for competition because of the existence of platforms such as SMWX on YouTube. So I'm happy to see the success of SMWX and to see where the whole space goes, really, because I think going to 2026, 2029, there's going to be lots of exciting content and opportunities for content, because what's happening in America has not fully happened yet in South Africa. I think even though President Ramaphosa didn't do a podcast in this particular election, the next election will see a lot more politicians going to podcasts to try to convince voters and to convince the global public about their arguments, investors, etc. So I'm happy and excited to see where this goes. That's the final comment I want to make. I don't know what you guys think about everything, but I'm done for this particular episode. Till the next one.